We have a breaking story, a special report on Joe Biden's mishandling of classified documents. He will not face criminal charges, and it turns out that this report is devastating news for Joe Biden and for his presidency. In fact, this could be the last nail in the coffin of his presidency, and we've got all the details right now. It's Larry O'Connor here for Town Hall Media with this special breaking news report. Thank you so much for watching. Yes, the special counsel's investigation into Joe Biden's mishandling of classified documents has concluded. The report has been delivered, and it has been determined that, yes, he did violate the law with regard to the mishandling of classified documents, but the special prosecutor will not press charges. Joe Biden will not face justice. Obviously, this is a reinforcement and validation of everyone's suspicions that there are two sets of rules in Washington, D.C., that there's two tiers of justice. Because as you know, former President Donald Trump is facing the exact same charge right now from Special Prosecutor Jack Smith, and his case is going to trial. He does have to defend himself in a court of law for alleged mishandling of classified documents. Of course, we're learning now that there are very distinct differences between what Joe Biden has been found to have done and what Donald Trump is being accused of doing. The most important distinction is where these documents were held. There are pictures in this report, and we'll share them with you in a moment, showing a dilapidated, falling apart cardboard box in a wide open garage with, broken lamps and the car for Joe Biden's family. That's where these classified documents were kept. Classified documents that had national security implications. They actually had documents with regard to our handling of overseas intelligence assets, with regard to the Afghan war, and they were just lying in the middle of a garage in a broken down cardboard box. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is alleged to have kept classified documents in his office behind locked doors in a fully secure Mar-a-Lago estate where there was Secret Service patrolling on a regular basis. Two very different ideas of handling of classified documents. Donald Trump will have to face justice in a court of law. Joe Biden skates. There's even more irony and outrage with regard to this. Take a look at this notation in the special prosecutor's report. The White House counsel's office and Mr. Biden's personal attorneys have argued that the Presidential Records Act authorizes a former president or vice president to keep classified materials in locations that are not approved for storage of classified information at home, as long as those materials are not defined as presidential records under the act. Why is that important? Because that is literally the argument that Donald Trump and his attorneys have been making from day one. And Joe Biden's lawyers, the hypocrisy here. Joe Biden's lawyers used the exact same argument. Donald Trump has issued a statement on this, and I want to read it for you. It says, "This has now proven to be a two-tiered system of justice and unconstitutional selective prosecution. The Biden document case is 100 times different and more severe than mine. I did nothing wrong, and I cooperated far more. What Biden did is outrageously criminal. He had 50 years of documents, 50 times more than I had, and willfully retained them." That's directly quoted from the special prosecutor's report. Willfully retained them. "I was covered by the Presidential Records Act. Secret Service was always around, and GSA delivered the documents. Deranged Jack Smith should drop this case immediately. Election interference." That's President Trump's statement on the two-tiered justice aspect of this outrageous report. Also, let's remind you, if we could, exactly what Joe Biden said about the charges against Donald Trump and his alleged mishandling of classified files at the time the story broke. And remember something, this clip, this reaction from Joe Biden about Donald Trump's mishandling of classified documents, this is before it was revealed that Joe Biden did the exact same thing. Well, actually did much worse, I believe, than Donald Trump. Here was Joe Biden's reaction then.
And you saw the photograph of the top secret documents laid out on the floor at Mar-a-Lago. What did you think to yourself looking at that image?
how that could possibly happen, how anyone could be that irresponsible. And I thought, what data was in there that may compromise sources and methods? By that, I mean names of people who helped, or et cetera. And it's just totally irresponsible.
Totally irresponsible. And it's funny, Scott Pelley said, when you saw that picture of the documents strewn out on the floor, it was the FBI who took those documents out of a file box and strewed them on the floor. It wasn't Donald Trump or Barron or Melania or someone else in the estate. It was the FBI that did that. And just irresponsibly mishandled. Can we go back and look at this picture on Donald Trump's statement here? That's the box in the garage with, everything flying around. That seems worse, doesn't it? And it's ironic that Joe Biden asked the question, what kind of national security secrets were in there? What about sources and methods and protecting people who are working through our intelligence agencies? This report literally shows that Joe Biden's documents contained that very information. Now, seeing that clip of Joe Biden having that reaction to the alleged mishandling of documents at the hands of Donald Trump, you might think that he's just a hypocritical, bald-faced liar, that he knew at that time that he was guilty of the exact same thing, and yet he was just accusing Donald Trump and not saying anything about the fact that he did the same thing. You may think that. But this is where this story gets even worse for Joe Biden, because according to this special prosecutor's report, Joe Biden wasn't willfully lying there about his mishandling of the documents. It appears that Joe Biden has absolutely no memory of mishandling classified documents, of having these documents at all. In fact, according to this report, Joe Biden doesn't remember much. And that's why they're not bringing charges against him. You heard me right. The prosecutor laid out the case and said, absolutely, Joe Biden is guilty of violating the law, willful retention of classified documents with national security secrets. And the reason he's not bringing charges is because Joe Biden is so addle-brained and feeble and has so much cognitive decline that he doesn't think a jury would convict him. Let's go right to the document. In his interview with our office, Mr. Biden's memory was worse. He did not remember when he was vice president, forgetting on the first day of the interview when his term ended. Quote, if it was 2013, when did I stop being vice president? By the way, he stopped being vice president on January 20th, 2017. But he wasn't sure if he was still vice president in 2013. And forgetting on the second day of the interview when his term began. In 2009, am I still vice president? Unquote. He did not remember, even within several years, when his son Beau died, and his memory appeared hazy when describing the Afghanistan debate that was once so important to him. Among other things, he mistakenly said he had a real difference of opinion with General Carl Eikenberry, when in fact Eikenberry was an ally whom Mr. Biden cited approvingly in his Thanksgiving memo to President Obama. Now, that last reference to General Eikenberry and Afghanistan, that's critically important to the prosecution of this case because so many of these documents had national security secrets regarding the war in Afghanistan. And if those charges were brought against him, he would be able to make the argument to the jury that he had no memory of when the war in Afghanistan was or any details about the war in Afghanistan. And so you can't hold him accountable for having those documents. I'm not exaggerating. Take a look at this. We have also considered that at trial, Mr. Biden would likely present himself to a jury, as he did during our interview of him, as a sympathetic, well-meaning, elderly man with a poor memory. Based on our direct interactions with and observations of him, he is someone for whom many jurors will want to identify reasonable doubt. It would be difficult to convince a jury that they should convict him, by then a former president, well into his 80s, of a serious felony that requires a mental state of willfulness. Now, there's a lot to examine there. we'll take that last part into consideration, that he can't be guilty of committing a crime of a mental state of willfulness. Well, here's the thing. He didn't commit this crime when he was well into his 80s. He committed this crime over the course of the last 20 plus years. So why that precludes him from facing prosecution because now he doesn't have the mental capacity, I don't understand. But regarding how the jury would be sympathetic to him because they would see him as just an old, feeble man with no memory, because by the time this faces a jury trial, he would be well into his 80s. Understand something. The timeline here puts this supposed trial where the jury would have so much sympathy for him and they couldn't possibly bring charges against him. That trial would occur smack in the middle of the second term that he wants right now. This special prosecutor is saying that at the same time Joe Biden wants to be in the White House for 5 more years, he couldn't actually be in a courtroom facing charges during the course of those same 5 years. This document may let Joe Biden off the hook for criminal prosecution on classified documents. This should be Exhibit A in the move to remove him from office under the guise of the 25th Amendment. This is unbelievable. Now, the media is already covering this story, obviously, wall to wall. Here's the way Peter Doocy reported it to the audience at Fox News Channel.
Larry, as President Biden gets ready a few minutes from now to campaign in Northern Virginia, the voting public is getting the first look at the way that he mishandled classified information. We've got a bunch of photos. You can see there are some damaged cardboard boxes in his Delaware garage. One of them is right between a folded dog crate and a dog's bed. But there are going to be no charges. And part of the reason is because the special counsel writes, at trial, Mr. Biden would likely present himself to a jury, as he did during our interview of him, as a sympathetic, well-meaning, elderly man with a poor memory. And that has the White House's special counsel really steamed. They are now saying we disagree with a number of inaccurate and inappropriate comments in the special counsel's report. The president's personal lawyer is also now out saying the special counsel could not refrain from investigative excess, perhaps unsurprising given the intense pressures of the current political environment. But they're saying this was willful, and President Biden wants some credit for this interview where the government is basically saying he was determined to be an unreliable witness. The president himself just told us, I was so determined to give the special counsel what they needed that I went forward with 5 hours of in-person interviews over 2 days on October 8th and 9th of last year, even though Israel had just been attacked on the 7th, and I was in the middle of handling an international crisis. We are being told late this afternoon that President Biden will soon put forward new measures to safeguard America's national secrets. But remember, when I asked him about this in some of his only public comments on this topic, still, because he hasn't talked on camera about it today, he insisted that he was taking care of the documents. Listen to this. Classified material next to your Corvette. What were you thinking?
Let me, we're going to get a chance to speak on all this, God willing, soon. But as I said earlier this week, people, and by the way, my Corvette's in a locked garage. Okay, so it's not like you're sitting out in the street. But anyway,
was in a locked garage.
Yes, as well as my Corvette.
Well, the special counsel was not satisfied with that answer. They went and looked in the garage, and even though they are bringing no charges, this is a very embarrassing report for a president in his 80s running for re-election, particularly since there have been multiple headlines this week about challenges he's had with his memory while campaigning.
Yeah, well, thank you, Peter. And at the very least, this is an embarrassing report, but I believe it is devastating. This is the beginning of the end of the Biden presidency. I think at the very least, it's the beginning of the end of Joe Biden even thinking about a second term and appearing on the ballot. This is a nightmare for the Biden White House and for the Biden re-election campaign. Joe Biden, by the way, just about 45, 50 minutes ago, gave remarks. And think about this for a minute. As I've just laid it out for you, this report confirms that he willfully violated the law against the mishandling of classified documents, documents that had national security implications, secrets, classified information, including information that compromises our intelligence assets overseas. And the only reason he's not facing charges is because he's not mentally capable of remembering that he broke the law, remembering why he broke the law. And the prosecutor just thinks a jury will find him sympathetic because he's a feeble old man. And Joe Biden, I'm not kidding, is treating this like a victory. Look at what he said.
Let me say a few things before I get started with our discussion. First, I'm not going to be very long, I promise. First, the special counsel released their findings today about their look into my handling of classified documents. I was pleased to see they reached the conclusion I believed and knew all along they would.
So he knew all along that they would reach the conclusion that he is so addled in his brain that he's incapable of presenting a defense before a jury, that he's so old and feeble and racked with loss of memory that he would be a sympathetic figure. And so that's why bother pressing charges against this guy? The jury's going to feel sorry for him. That's what he expected. He's pleased with this report. Meanwhile, he gave further remarks here. And if we're concerned at this point about the state of the president's mental abilities, he pretty much confirmed a little later in these remarks exactly what the special prosecutor witnessed during his testimony.
When we pushed all these programs, I said, I'm going to be a president for everybody, whether you live in a red state or a green state.
Maybe the color correction on his television is wrong whenever he's watching election results and the blue looks a little greenish. Or maybe, yeah, I'm not aware, but there could be some blue states that are actually getting a little splash of yellow, thus turning them green. Or maybe the president's brain is broken. And then there was this one when he spoke passionately about an issue that he has felt so concerned about for the last 50 years of his political career. So this is something that he's so focused on. I'm sure he's going to get this one right.
And making Roe v. Wade the law of the land.
Roe v. Wade. Sure. Everything's fine. The beginning of the end of the Joe Biden presidency starts today. There is no possible way this man survives this, and there's no possible way that the party allows him to move forward. This is beyond a devastating report for Joe Biden and for the Democrats. Do not be surprised if a move under the 25th Amendment begins immediately. Do not be surprised if members of the House of Representatives begin investigations and perhaps letters of impeachment on this. And don't be surprised if Kamala Harris behind the scenes starts maneuvering. Yes, the president got off. He won't face criminal charges. But he won't be president much longer.